Okay, so we've switched vehicles. We're getting to one that's low enough for me to actually see inside of and be able to get a camera pointed at the right stuff to show you what we do when we're under the hood. Okay. As we lift the hood up, one of the first things we notice, I'm going to do this one more time. This will follow me up. With a little nudge, it'll follow me up. That tells me that these struts right here are in good shape. Okay. I know these struts are in good shape because we replaced these struts when this vehicle first came to us. The hood would not hold itself up, and you know the problem with that is you get in here and check the oil, and it holds itself up for a second. You stick your head in here, then that hood drops on your head, and you end up with a bruise or worse. Ask me, I know from experience. But once we get under here, we're going to be looking at all this stuff. Okay. First things first, we're going to check the engine oil. We discussed that earlier in the video. I'm not going to go through that one again. After that, we're going to grab transmission fluid, say, and it's also a dipstick. And each type of vehicle has a different method of checking. Okay, this one you just check with the engine off, and just like you would engine oil. Where that other pickup we were working on earlier, you'd want to check that one running in neutral or in park. You check the oil there. So you need to know what you're looking at, what type of vehicle, and what that vehicle specification is for checking the transmission fluid. So down here, deep in the deep dark hole, is this transmission dipstick. We pull this guy out of here. Again, we're looking at fluid color. We want it to be red and clear. This one is exactly that. It's red and clear. Should be, because we changed this one just recently. So we are looking for that. Now, as we did, now you saw me, I just pulled that out and checked it. I wasn't checking level, that was just conditions. So now I've got to reach clear down in this deep dark hole and find the little dipstick tube that hides way down in here. Insert this back in the dipstick tube. Pull this back out. Now I can check the level. And if you look real close, the transmission fluid level comes right to that top dot. That's perfect. That's exactly where we want it. Okay. I'm going to stick this back in, call that one good. Now, it's pretty easy to see if the transmission fluid needs changed. It would be, say, black or have, God forbid, glitter in that fluid that I took out. Or it would have a burnt smell. That would tell us the fluid needs changed. At that point, we always recommend changing the transmission filter. That lives inside the pan on a lot of vehicles. On this particular vehicle, it doesn't have an internal filter to be changed. But the pickup over there that we started working on, that does have an internal filter and would need to be changed during the transmission fluid exchange. Now, something we do different here at Rogers Mobile Lube, when we change transmission in a vehicle that has a pan and a serviceable filter, we will always change that filter and then use a pumping method that we have another video. I'll put a link in the description here, but the method of changing that transmission fluid will change all of the transmission fluid. So we'll change the filter, and then all the fluid that lives up inside that transmission, which is about 2/3 of the total volume, lives inside of that. Most shops will just pull the pan, change the filter, refill the pan. That's a third of the total fluid volume, and then they want to bill you for the transmission service. We feel like that's wrong. We won't do it that way. So we will change the filter, refill the pan, pump the rest of the transmission out. Again, you'll see that video in the link below, but we do it what we call the right way. It takes more time, it takes more expense, it takes a lot more fluid, but it's the correct way to do a transmission fluid service. Next question.
How do you check coolant level and conditioning? How do you know if the coolant is bad?
How do we check coolant level and condition, and how do we know if it's bad? Okay. On this vehicle, the coolant reservoir lives right here. Now, this happens to be one that's very difficult to see because I don't even know if we can get it on camera, but way down inside of here, I'll hold that if you'd like there, Steven. Do you see those two lines on the side of the bottle down there? Those are the full, there There's two lines on the side of the bottle down there, and that's the level cold and the level hot. And the level cold should be at the bottom one, and the level hot should be at the top one. In this vehicle, it's very difficult to see that, and so we have to shine lights in the bottle, or we have to take the lid off and look down inside of there, and we're looking for that. Now, on this bottle, there's a little snorkel tube. And we'll bring the snorkel tube out, and on the bottom of this thing there should be some drips, and we'll take some of these drips. Now we're looking for the manufacturer color. Some manufacturers use green, some use orange, some use pink. In this one it's kind of a teal color. It's like it's a greenish bluish color, okay? We're looking for clear fluid. As coolant begins to age, it will start to get kind of a film and like a cloudiness to it, or sometimes we'll see it black or rusty. If we see any of that kind of stuff, we're going to recommend you start exploring getting that changed. So that being said, coolant is the one fluid we won't change. Generally, the lifespan of coolant is about the same as a water pump and a timing belt in the car, usually 80 to 100,000 miles. By the time the coolant needs changed and we see it starting to get bad, it's generally lining up with those other repairs. Now, we don't do those repairs, so we always recommend you take those to a shop to have that done. Very necessary, very important things to have done, but that's the reasoning that we don't do coolant exchanges. That's we reserve that for a shop with the proper equipment to do that. Next question, sir.
How do you check power steering fluid, and what's the difference between electric and hydraulic power steering?
Okay, so the question is, how do you check power steering fluid, and then how do you know if it's electric or hydraulic? Okay, the simple answer is, if it has power steering fluid, it's hydraulic, and it has to be changed periodically. About every 30 to 50,000 miles, you should change the power steering fluid. If it doesn't have fluid, then it's going to be either a manual or an electric power steering. Manual being not power assisted, and we don't see many cars that way these days, and definitely don't see it in commercial trucks. But economy cars at one point, the car I grew up with in high school did not have power steering at all. In this vehicle, it has power steering fluid. And again, we look over here and we'll see these two lines on the side of the bottle. It says upper level, lower level, and this is where we want it to be between. If you can see it on the camera, I don't know if you can, but this level is about right here. It's right in between. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this thing off of here, this little cap, and I'll either use my trusty zip tie, or in this case I'll just stick my finger down in there and I'll find that fluid. Now I'm looking for, they come in different colors, red, yellows, clear sometimes, but I want it to be a clear color. I don't want to see black fluid. I don't want to see glitter. No metal. That looks great to me. We will put that lid back on and call that one good. You'll see it on your service report. It'll say full and good for that fluid, just like the transmission fluid would say, just like the coolant would say, in these particular examples. Okay, Steven, next question.
Why does brake fluid go bad, and what does a squishy pedal mean? Okay, so we get the question all the time of, we'll recommend brake fluid be changed, and the question is, why does it go bad? Like, what? I've never even heard of that. Most people have never even thought to change their brake fluid. And what we see happen with brake fluid is a couple things. One, it's what is called a hydroscopic fluid, and that just means it will absorb water, and it does that right out of the air. It just absorbs humidity out of the air. And over about a 2-year period of time, that will absorb enough moisture where it can start rusting the internal components of the brakes, clear down from the metal connectors on the lines down to the calipers themselves. Things can start rusting. The other thing we'll see is there's like this algae that can grow in it because of the water content, and the algae can start plugging orifices and things down inside of the anti-lock system, which can be a big problem. So we don't want that kind of stuff to happen. The other problem, especially if you're pulling heavy loads or carrying, box vans or these fleet vehicles that carry a lot of weight, is brake fluid, when it gets water in it, will boil at a much lower temperature, and if it boils, you'll have no pedal. That's just a recipe for an accident. And so we recommend changing the brake fluid every 2 years. It's got a little reservoir
just like the power steering does. There's a lid here. We're looking for clear fluid, clear like water. Now, looking through the bottle, it doesn't look like water, but inside of here, you'll see much clearer fluid. So if I touch here and I put it on my finger, it's clear like water. It looks really good. This one has been in here for about a year. Probably has about one more year left before we change it. The level is in between the marks where it needs to be. I think I can't get my head around there quite right. Yeah, low levels this first mark and the top one's right here, so anywhere between here is good. Now the thing about brake fluid that we as technicians have to really pay attention to is as the brake pads wear, fluid goes down and replaces that worn material in the lines. And so the more worn the brake pads are, the lower this level in this reservoir will be. And so if we get in here and fill this thing up on a car that is just getting ready to get new brakes, when we go to put the new brakes on and we compress those pistons, it'll push fluid back up into this reservoir and overflow it. So we never want to fill that to the top. We always want that to be kind of in proportion to where those brake pads are, which is always, you know, in between those lines somewhere. Never do we fill those completely to the top. The other part of that question was, what does a squishy pedal mean, right? Spongy brake pedal means there's air in the system. Now, air can be introduced into the system through a low reservoir or a leak somewhere in there. It can be a leak somewhere else in the system, either in one of the lines or in a brake caliper itself, or it could be from boiled fluid. If the fluid does boil because of heat, because of a heavy load or heavy braking, you can lose brake pedal feel because it'll create bubbles in there that are compressible. Spongy brake pedal is a common thing. Generally, just a good bleeding or a fluid exchange will fix it. Sometimes it requires mechanical repairs. Next question, sir.
Should I check my air filter even if the gauge says it's okay? And what is the proper way to check an air filter?
Yeah, the question is checking air filters. So some vehicles right here in the, either on the box or here in the lines, the tube somewhere, the intake tube will have a gauge, and it's kind of a suction gauge, and the suction gauge shows you whether there's restriction in the air filter. As the engine's trying to pull air through the air filter, if there becomes a vacuum in here from that gauge will register that, and it's kind of it's a sight indicator to show that there's a dirty filter. We don't trust those, and not because that's a bad design or anything. They work just fine, but we've seen too many times where we see that gauge says it's okay, but we pull the filter out and visually inspect it, and the filter's been torn open, is doing nothing to filter air, and because it's torn open, there's no restriction, and the gauge says it's okay. So the owner of the vehicle could look at that, or the technician who's working on it could look at that, think everything's okay, when inside of there's a big problem brewing. We've seen that just too many times, so we don't trust those gauges. Unfortunately, we don't have a gauge for you to look at here today, but they exist on a lot of GM vehicles. There's some commercial trucks that have them too on the side. The worst one I ever saw was on a medium duty diesel truck it was a Mercedes that had a completely torn open air filter, but the gauge said it was okay, so the driver just kept going on it, and he was waiting for that gauge to tell him it was okay. He never bothered to look at it visually. So one of the things that we want to show you here,
I'm going to add to that real quick too.
Yes, sir.
Specifically on the newer GM vehicles, I'm sure other companies do it too. On the dash, like how you would find your oil percentage, they also have an air filter percentage now, and we find a lot of times that those aren't accurate either. Yeah, visual inspection is really the only way to be 100% sure that filter's okay. Now we're going to go through and check this air filter here, just to show you a couple things that we run into that are common mistakes made in this. Okay, now what we're looking for in here is the routing of this air filter. So on this air filter, the dirty side is going to be on the bottom. Okay, this lid will come up right inside of there's going to be the air filter, but what we're looking at when we pull the lid off is the clean side. And so what we see happen a lot is technicians from shops will go in here and they pull this lid up and they see a clean air filter, they put it back on and call it good to go. Well, they didn't bother to take it out and look at the actual dirty side. So
I can't remember when the last time this air filter was changed, but we're going to check it and kind of show you possibly an example of clean side, dirty side, okay? So bear with me here. We'll cut real quick until I get this lid off, and I'll show you what this looks like. Okay, so we've taken this lid back, and if you look in here, again, this is the clean side. So this filter looks perfect. Other than a little fingerprint right here, it looks fantastic. But if I lift this guy up and I show you the other side, it does not look perfect. And this is the problem. We see it with vehicles all the time where they're not looking at the dirty side. Okay, so now one of the other things we're looking at is down inside these pleats. We want to look down in here and see what's down here. Okay, this filter's dirty. This filter is not filthy. This would be a prime example where we would say recommend a next oil change. Okay, this vehicle's oil was changed about 8,000 miles ago. 8,000 miles from now would probably be a good time to change this filter, but it's not ready yet, so we might as well use it up and not change it prematurely. But again, this is an example of we know it's coming and we know roughly when it's coming, and so the next time we show up here to do an oil change, we'll bring this filter with us. All right, so the next question is, how do we check batteries and what are we looking for? So if you come over here and we're looking at this battery, we're looking at these connectors. We want to make sure they're tight. We want to open these little guys up and make sure it's tight. But if you look down in here, I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but there's a little bit of white powder down inside of there that we're looking at. And in that case, that's the beginnings of some corrosion, okay? Now that happens as the battery ages. This battery was done last summer, so it's not that old. But what we want to do is make sure there's not a ton of that stuff and clean that, okay? So we will put a anti-corrosion, what is that stuff called? Cleaner on there. We'll put an anti-corrosion cleaner on there to get that stuff off, and then we'll put a protectant on there that will actually keep that from happening again, at least as much as possible. Eventually an old battery is going to corrode. We want to generally we'll change a battery before they start to corrode, because that is a signal of the end of its life. The other thing that we want to check is the health of the battery, and we have these machines on board our trucks that we'll connect. I'm just going to show you how this is done real quick, and we'll take the positive hookup, and we'll hook that guy up first, and then we'll come over here with the negative one, and we'll hook up to that. This is a load tester. What this is doing is it shows us that there's 12 volts on this battery. We'll hit it with a load, which is when I push this button, and you'll see this needle drop down. I'll hold it for 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it is holding strong at around 700 amps is where that needle went to. That's about where this battery should be. It's a 640 cranking amp battery. It was right there in that. It's hard to tell whether it was a 650 or 7, but it's right where it should be. So this battery tests very healthy. Okay. So if I would have pushed that button and the needle dropped and then begin to just continue to drop, we would know that this battery has worn out. And at that point, it's time to replace the battery. The next hot weather or cold weather you get, you're going to be stranded. And so when we test these with the load tester, we're looking for that thing to, under a full load like that, to hold strong. This battery should put up with that kind of a load for a while. This is a good opportunity to say the battery brand we use is Interstate Battery. Those guys, we work hand in hand with them. We do a lot of work for their customers as far as replacing batteries at people's homes and businesses. And we've been working with those guys for 13 years, I think now, and they've treated us very well. They've serviced us really well. Their batteries last. If there's a problem, they warranty it, no questions asked. It's a fantastic company. So Interstate Battery is who we use. If you have us replace the battery, that's what we're going to bring. So we'll move on to the next question. Okay, so the next question was Serpentine belts, or drive belts is another name for them. what are we looking for on those guys? So if you'll peek your head right down in here, this is another situation where there's two sides to this belt. This outer side, generally these are going to look pretty good. Now there's exceptions to that. Sometimes we'll see, you know, marks or cuts or you know, abrasion, signs of abrasion on there. Big deal if you see it on this side. The side that we're looking at, I don't know if you can see this. Do we have our light? Is the rib side. And I'm not sure if you can see that on camera.
Yeah, I can.
But what we're looking for is nice, square, healthy ribs. We want those to have little sharp corners on them, and we want no missing ribs or chunks taken out of ribs or unevenly worn ribs or cracks in the ribs. All these different things will show up on these belts. Now, for your reference, this belt on this vehicle, there's one belt, and it drives the power steering pump, it drives the water pump, it drives the vacuum for the brake booster, the air for the catalytic converter, the air conditioning. If that belt goes, it drives the alternator. So if the belt goes, your battery dies, you have short-lived power brake assist, you have no power steering, every dash light in the car will come on, the alternator won't charge, the water pump won't turn, so you're going to overheat, your battery's going to die, you're not going to have power steering. Some vehicles don't run the brakes off a different system, but you may not have power brakes. It's kind of scary if that belt breaks, and so it'll leave you stranded. So as part of our inspection, we go through here and we look at those. We make sure that belt is healthy, because a broken serpentine belt is a big deal in any vehicle. Some use more than one belt. We're going to look at all of them, but Subarus, for certain years of Subarus, use 3 belts. We check those, all 3 of those belts, and if they need changed, again, you're going to see that on your service report.
To add to that one, another thing that we'll not look for but rather hear is when we're turning on your vehicle, check for dash lights and stuff like that, or moving it. That's also something we want to listen for. If there's squealing,
there's a squeal for sure,
or some other sound, we want to make sure that we're checking out the belt, and not only make sure that just the belt is all right, but all the pulleys and stuff like that as well.
Correct. Good. Thank you, Brendan. Next question, sir.
What type of washer fluid do we use?
Okay, so the next question was washer fluid. The washer fluid we use, we're kind of particular about. We don't just use a generic washer fluid to get anywhere. There's some things we're looking for, partly because of the length of time that our oil can be in a vehicle. This is up to a year. We're going to see 4 seasons. Okay, so washer fluid that we use has to be 4-season compatible. What we've seen happen in the past is somebody will stick a summer formula washer fluid in their bottle just before winter. In the first cold snap we get, that stuff freezes solid in there, and they don't have cleaner, and it expands and breaks the bottle. So using the wrong stuff can cause problems. So we use an all season. I think it's good down to -25 degrees. Then we also use the Rain-X brand because it has 2 things. It has a bug remover, so we all want that with our windshield washer fluid, but it also has the Rain-X water shedding technology, and it's super cool stuff. When you get driving down a freeway and it's raining, we almost never even have to use wipers because that just sheds the water off the windshield. So we get that 3-fold temperature, bugs, and water shedding capability out of the washer fluid. So when you use our service, that just comes with it. We never charge for washer fluid. It's just a thing that needs done. We do it free of charge. This brings us to the next question, sir.
What are we looking for when it comes to washer fluid? Like, what problems are we looking for, like lines and nozzles?
Okay. So the next question was related to washer fluid. What are we looking for if there's a problem? Okay. So you see this little guy right here. This is the line that actually carries the washer fluid from the pump up under the hood to the nozzles, which are these little doohickeys right here. If one of these guys isn't spraying right, these can be clogged up. We see them frequently where they're broken. We can order new ones of those, put new ones of those in there. If there's a line that's cracked or broken or leaking, you know, you may not have proper pressure. You may get some, but it's not going to spray like it needs to. The other thing that we see is I mentioned before, if fluid's ever frozen down in there, is those bottles can break, and we see that fairly often. Certain models of vehicles especially will see broken, the actual fill container that holds the washer fluid can be broken, and you know, in some cases those need to be replaced. In commercial vehicles, where we're talking to especially owners of fleets, having a good washer fluid bottle and a functioning washer fluid system is a DOT thing. You need to have that. It's kind of like having lights that work and mirrors that function and parking brake that works and a fire extinguisher on board. It's part of that rule set that your drivers can be cited for if they, for whatever reason, that system doesn't work. So we're going to be looking for all that stuff as part of our inspection, make sure that stuff functions. Okay, so another question we get frequently is wiper blades. What do we do with those? Now, wiper blades is a common thing we replace often, but there's some things you got to know about these guys. So when we're doing inspections on wiper blades, we're lifting this arm up and we're checking the ends of these guys. We're kind of flipping our way down it. We're making sure it's smooth on the edge so it's actually functioning and cleaning the windshield. We're making sure there's no tears on here or chunks missing out of here. The plastic bits here are solid and there's not, you know, it's not getting ready to fall off. But one of the things that we see, and this is just kind of a little pro tip we thought we'd throw in here, is, well, I'm gonna actually bring up two things that we see. One of them is if this blade gets completely worn out, we see this happen a lot, where these will get broke off. We'll see drivers that'll leave the metal end of the arm, wiper them back and forth on the windshield because maybe their driver's side one works, but their passenger side one doesn't, and it scratches the windshield bad. The other thing that we have to do is in the kind of pro tip categories, when we're changing these blades out, we will pull the old blade off and then we'll very gently set the arm back down while we get our new blade and get it prepared to come on there. If you leave these guys hanging up here and for some reason that gets bumped, that spring will whack the windshield and break the windshield. And so I don't know how much that pertains to everything else we're talking about, but it's something to really, if you're changing your own wiper blades, keep that in mind. You don't want a broken windshield because you left the arm dangling up there with the metal end on it. Okay, one of the other questions we get often is lights. Exterior lighting on the vehicle is part of that DOT thing we talked about earlier. All of the lights on the vehicle have to work, from headlights to turn signals to brake lights, marker lights, all that stuff has to work. So part of our inspection is to get in the vehicle and check all of the lights functionality and make sure there's no broken lenses. If there are, we're going to tell you about it. Most of those we can replace, but there's a few vehicles that actually require disassembly of parts of the car to get to, and in that case we'll send you to a shop for that. But most of the time, the small light bulbs, turn signals, and that kind of stuff, we carry a few of those on board the truck. Most of the time, the common ones we can just replace right there on the spot. And generally, with those small light bulbs, that's a service we'll do. We'll charge it for the light bulb. We don't charge labor on it, but it's the only thing that we will do without asking you. Mainly because it has to be done. We're there. If we have it, we'll do it. It just removes that hassle from you for having to pull that vehicle out of service at another time to get it done. So again, if we have it on board, we'll just do it right there. If it's an expensive light bulb, if it's something that's going to be, you know, an investment for you, we'll bring it up. But if it's one of those small $3 light bulbs, you know, we're just going to do it. The next question.
Maintenance lights, and why will your oil change lights still come on when using the Amsoil?
Okay, that's a good question. So the question is, what about the maintenance reminder lights on the dashboard? When we do an oil change, we will reset those lights, okay? There's generally reminder lights for oil changes. They come up differently. Some of them say service engine soon. Some of them say change oil soon. Some of them say, there's just different messages. But those maintenance reminder lights will reset those. Okay, so one of the other questions is maintenance reminder lights, and what happens when we put the long life synthetic oil in the vehicle. Why does the light continue to come on at the normal time? The answer is the car doesn't know we put a long life synthetic oil in it, and so that oil light is set to go off at a prescribed number of miles or under certain conditions. GM vehicles will take temperature, throttle input, trailer towing, all this stuff, and add it into a calculation that'll tell it roughly how far a normal engine oil should go. It is not calculated or calibrated for our long life synthetic, and so, you know, somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 miles, that light's going to come on every vehicle. Give us a holler, we'll just come back out there, reset the light, just double check everything's okay, and send you on your way. Do we have any other questions besides that?
Why would you recommend me to take my vehicle to a shop?
Yeah, so the question is, why would we recommend, you'll sometimes see in a service report that we'll recommend taking the vehicle to a shop. The reason that happens, there's a million of them, but really it's when there's a mechanical repair that needs done that we can't do. We will recommend you take it to a shop. That could be we're hearing a noise in the engine, or we're hearing something with the exhaust, or we're seeing something with suspension that, you know, that it requires a shop and special tooling, or, you know, much deeper surgery than we can perform. We're going to recommend a shop, and so be watching for that. We have some good recommendations of some shops if you don't have a relationship with one. If you do, that's what we're going to recommend you doing. There's a lot of things on vehicles that we just don't service. To get into a little detail on that, one of the things that how we gauge what services we will provide and not provide is based on the time. If it can't be done in a 2-hour time period, we won't take that on, because we want to make sure that no matter what time of day that we see your vehicle, that we can have that thing finished that day, so that your technician or yourself, the driver of the vehicle, can be back on the road within 2 hours. If it's a longer service than that, then we would recommend you take it to a shop. Do we have anything else?
That was everything.
All right, so that is the end of our question and answer time. We appreciate you taking a look at this video and taking the time to explore what we can do for you as a service provider. If there's any more questions, you can drop questions down in the comments. We're available right there at that phone number, 208-447-6702. That will call me directly. But yeah, if there's other questions you have, we would love to answer those. As you kind of noticed in the video, we don't do everything, but we sure do a lot. And we are noticing as time goes on, we've been in business now for 14 years, one of the common comments we get is people used to have vehicles that would last them 150,000 miles, maybe 200,000 miles, and they had to replace them. Under our maintenance program, we're commonly seeing 350,000 miles before vehicles have to be replaced. So from an investment standpoint, that we provide even a little more than just oil change service. We provide longevity and a better bang for your buck, a better investment for your fleet. The last thing you as an owner want to be doing is changing vehicles out prematurely, and if we can be part of that maintenance program that keeps those around longer for you, well, that's what we want to do. So again, if you have any other questions, give us a call at that number. Send us an email, rogersmobilube@gmail.com, on our website at rogersmobilube.com that you can visit. We're constantly posting stuff on Instagram under Rogers Mobilube on Instagram, little tips and tricks and, you know, stuff that's similar to what we went over in this video today, little pro tips here and there, if you're curious about more of the stuff that we do. But, for now, that's it. Thank you for being here. Talk to you later.